So yeah, I've got a little bit of background on this. So since 2008, I've been practicing agronomist back in Kentucky. If you can't tell, they tried to make me tell everybody I was from Canada, but I thought that didn't believable. But so I want this to kind of be interactive a little bit up front. I'd like to ask you guys some questions. So let's think about this. What do we consider precision soil sampling, or what is nutrient management to you on your farm today, or in your business, or in the industry you're in, or to you at the soil lab, or you, Tim? I mean, what is it to you guys? This is the part where y'all talk. I'm gonna get tired here of me talking. What is it? I mean, what's a piece of it?
I want to know where I got it.
Just knowing just results. We need to know results and how they're stratified, right? What else? What's precision soil sampling? Think about this over time.
The geolocating your soil sample, that was the beginning of a precision.
Right. Yeah, georeferencing. Accuracy as far as
Soil values.
soil value.
Yep.
Good. So where did y'all come from? What session? Big room, Brad?
Radicle.
Okay, good. All right, so what about zone region sampling? So decreasing the area in which that result represents. So think about this. We've went down to 2.5, 5, 10 acre grids. But our grandfathers, they just sampled a field, shot it out on there, right? So we're increasing the sampling density. What about decreasing the number of crops grown in between when we sample? So increasing sample frequency, right? I mean, that's one of the things we've done. Sometimes you hear about farms that haven't been soil tested in years. What about reallocation of fertilizer? So knowing your result and knowing where it is. So what if we have a high level here and reallocating that flat rate spread instead of flat rating it, we're variable rating, putting it where we need, right? We're just a reallocation of fertilized dollars. So I want to ask you a few questions. I want to challenge you to think about what we know today is what industry standard is as far as what we're currently doing today as the masses, right? So where you pull your sample, where you geo-reference your sample, is that representative of the area in which that sample result is going to represent? Have you validated that where you're applying your fertilizer based on your rates is providing you dollars back? So if you spend $1, if you just get $1 back, are you happy with that? What if you don't get those dollars back from that dollar? Right, we want to spend $1 and get money back. Kyle brought up accuracy. Are the results you're getting today good enough to make decisions to provide you ROI? And if you verify that what you spend on your fertilizer program or where you put it or how you apply it brings you back dollars. Why is this an issue? What's a big problem? I mean, monetarily, this is a big budget item. It's a big ticket item for us. Whether a farmer, we're making recommendations, we're playing with dollars for our customers as agronomists or farmers. We're spending that money. It's about $250 an acre for corn. And that's with our nitrogen. It's $95 for beans. You got 1,000 acres and a 50-50 rotation. It's $172,000. Like, that's not chunk change, right? Like, that's a lot of money that we're playing with year to year. So monetarily, it affects you directly. It affects your pocketbook. It affects the way you live, what your family gets to do, right? So this is a pretty busy graph, so I'll try to explain it. So Illinois' Farm Docs has got some charts, and this is phosphorus and this is potassium, but this is the pounds of P applied per bushel. So what we're seeing is the efficiency. So the number of pounds of P we apply per bushel we harvest off of that acre. So we won't talk much about poverty grass, which is wheat on the blue line. But let's look at soybeans here on this orange line. You see this trend line's kind of going down, right? So this is pounds a bushel applied. This is from 2002 to 2024. I want to note that this is over 22 years. And let's look at phosphorus on corn. This it's going down a little bit maybe, but it's pretty flat. In potassium, let's look at our soybean line. It's took a little bit of a dive. We've got a little bit more efficient with potassium on soybeans, according to this chart. That's all you're looking at. And corn, kind of this same linear, almost flat, going down a little bit here. So you've got this in a chart, and you see 1%, 1%, 2%, 1.5%, right? Negative. That means we've got more efficient with P and K with corn and beans. Annually, about 1 to 2%, 1.5%. If you just saw these charts. So now we have to know, let's think about this. This is still over the course of 22 years. So look at your corn line for phosphorus on the top. It's actually going up. So this chart represents the amount of phosphorus applied per acre for corn and beans annually. And as we can see over 22 years, the phosphorus is we're applying more phosphorus. And for soybeans, it's pretty well flat. And so our soybeans, this is potassium. For soybeans, that line's going down a little bit, but it's relatively flat over 22 years. And our corn line is pretty flat. So how are we getting more efficient with fertilized pounds of nutrient per bushel if we're still applying the same amount? Well, let's look at our corn yield trends and our soybean yield trends from 2020 to 2024, the same time period. That trend line's going up. We're not doing better with our fertilized dollars. We're just making more yield, which is making less pounds in P of K per bushel. That's where the efficiency is coming from. Could we not assume from that other technologies that are increasing our yields in our fields, that's where we're getting our efficiency from our fertilizer? Let's think about this. We're applying the same amount, but we're getting 1% more efficient per year. So you have a 22% efficiency over 22 years, but we're still applying the same amount. How's that happen? We're just yielding more over 22 years. Trend lines and yield just keep going up. We're not doing better with applying fertilizer. We're just making more yield. So let's think about, I want you to think about this process and why we're not doing a very good job with this. I mean, you would think in 22 years with all the technology we've got, we would get more efficient. Not because we're making more yield, but you would think we could apply less to get that yield. So let's think about the process in which we go through from soil collection to putting product on the ground. So the nutrient management, what we currently do today. I want to think about how much error we induce as humans and through the process and the lack of innovation in this today, what we may, variability we may induce in the results in the application. So is it 20%, 30%? Do we even know? We don't know. Let's step through this one at a time. So let's think about sampling and sampling collection. So do we induce variability through sample collection? So let's think about it. We've got augers, we got probes. Some people use spades. You just take a shovel. So we take a soil, so we collect the soil. When do we collect samples? Spring, fall? Do we do in-season in-tests? What do we do? Do we do points or region samples? We geo-reference it, but how's it geo-referenced? Is it a point? Is it a polygon? How are we walking? How much of the area inside of that 2.5 acre grid or that zone are we walking to cover that? If we park a four-wheeler in the center of a 2.5 acre grid and walk a circle around a four-wheeler, does that represent that 2.5 acres? What if we did that in a zone? So when we probe, do different depths matter? Are we perfect all the time in that depth? Are we homogenizing an A and B zone in the depth that we choose? Are we getting different soil types and soil series within that sample that we're trying to manage? So traditionally today, how it's done, it's just industry standard. There are a lot of guys who make zones, but there's a whole lot of 2.5 acre grids out there. We just throw a grid on a field, drop a point in there. Tony Balkville will talk more about this. Even if we're creating management zones in your system, like even the data layers that we piece together to put into that, whether it be yield data or whatnot, some of those aren't clean. So what you put in is what you get out. So if that data layer is not very accurate, you may not have a very accurate management zone in the end. Is that going to induce variability if that management zone shifts, or you're just taking a 2.5 acre grid and there's the point, we'll sample there. How representative of that is that of your field? So we'll kind of go through this. We just dropped a 2.5 acre grid on a field boundary. Let's put some Sergo data behind that. What percentage of those points do you think that just run in a circle around an ATV or a side-by-side, do you think we can get multiple soil types? Do all of those soil types respond the same to potassium and phosphorus for a corn and soybean crop? Do you think this is a way we could deduce variability? This is just an elevation model off a field that we have, that one of my customers' field. So just dropped a 2.5 acre grid on an elevation map. Are we accounting for elevation at all? We've done a very poor job of that, have we not? Let's look at soil type with slope. Is there variability? I mean, it's not even close. We're not accounting for spatial variability. So let's just look at one yield map that can't be cleaned up. You just can't get it much cleaner than this. It's just poor data. How well did we scatter points through this? This is 5 acre grids on a 200 acre farm a mile long. We did a poor job, didn't we? None of that makes any sense. What about normalized yield data in a 2.5 acre grid? This is aggregated yield data over about 8 years. It's a shotgun approach. Additional food for thought. I just want you to think through this. What if you traditionally pull samples in the fall? You get wet, delayed harvest, then we go pull in the spring. Do you think that the nutrients, those water soluble nutrients, are coming out of that plant? Do you think it's going to show up on the soil test? I did some work early on because it's one thing I chased, and it's why I'm at Radicle today, is because we went out and flagged in the fall right behind the combine. I took samples under this heavy residue. We don't have a lot of wind at home. Residue pretty well stays the same. Came back in the spring after we had all the winter weather, one snow, mostly rain, and the potassium results were vastly different at the same point because some of that potassium leaks out of that crop. How do you sample a field that's had nutrients banded on it? I don't mean strip till. What about planter banding? It's a pretty common practice today. How do we best sample this? How do you know if one got in a band, 3 cores got in a band, 9 cores got in a band? Do you change that if you're sampling on a soybean field or residue versus corn residue? Less likely that we banded nutrients on the soybean field, right? Do you have different sampling patterns or methods for strip till, conventional till, minimum till, or no till? Does it matter? Does it matter how those nutrients are stratified in our soil? Absolutely. If we're incorporating it, it's probably going to matter. Even to a depth. If you got min till, 3 inch, we're incorporating the top 3 inches. What about the 3 under that? We're not moving them. Does it matter? Probably does. Are we getting the exact same sample depth on every core? Does it matter? Does a 1/4 inch difference matter? Does a 1/2 inch difference matter? It does. But can we quantify it? How do we account for all the soil types and textures? Think about this. What if a point got dropped in a triangle where an 80-foot spreader has to overlap every year because they set it at 100% overlap? Think about that. That may be a pretty small area, it may be a pretty big area. You just don't really know. Depends on the triangle, right? Is that inducing variability into the results in which are affecting our fertilizer dollars? Let's look at lab analysis and recommendation data sets and recommendation indices and think about how this works. So this is from John Sawyer and Antonio Mallarino. Don't worry about reading it. I'm going to read you read it to you. Although you might not be able to understand this Kentucky accent, I'll do my best. It is imperative that one knows what soil test method was employed before you can adequately derive at a phosphorus fertilization recommendation. An important consideration, as there have been many methods developed to test soils for crop available P, and each have a widely different interpretation index. What can we get from that? What do we get from that? So if your lab is doing X, Y, or Z, all three have a different interpretation. A different range in which an optimum value for a corn or soybean crop may be. Iowa State's got the most comprehensive recommendation data set that I've seen from a university today. You can see here, they have a line for Braid P1 and Malik 3 colorimetric. I just want you to look at the optimum range, 18 to 25. We got an Olson P. It's normally done in the northwest and in the west. The optimum rate's 11 to 25. That's two different ranges, and they're saying we're optimum, but it's two different measurements. Completely. It's two different analyses as well, so the results are different. What about Malik 3 ICP? 28 to 40. We don't even have any overlap. I mean, this is a range this big. Think about that. Let's look at the potassiums. We've got a dry field analysis and a moist field analysis. How many labs do field moist analysis? 2 or 3? North American. Most are dry. Does it change? We're 101 to 150 in the optimum range on a moist analysis, but on a dry analysis, we're 171 to 220. They don't even overlap. There's 21 parts per million difference in the middle that don't even have a range. If you didn't know what you're doing. How many people in the room today know if what your lab analysis is? Is it Braid P1? See a few hands go up. 20% of the room. So Illinois State Recs, we can choose any lab we want because Illinois doesn't have a soil testing lab. So we have to go to a commercial lab. So it says right here in the fine print, it's always that fine print we got to read, isn't it? You know, it's always that fine print. It says these values should not be used for Olson or Malik 3 ICP. I wonder how many people here today are using Illinois FertRecs, if you're from Illinois, and have no idea if you're getting a Malik 3 ICP or a Malik 3 colorimetric.
Most of the labs in Illinois run Malik 3 ICP.
That's right. But what if you're using a lab outside Illinois?
Well, some will run other ones. A lot of times they're using ICP and then they'll give you the results as a Braid or something else.
Right.
They'll convert them.
Converted.
Yeah.
So wait a minute. Now we have a calculator. Who's validated that? You see what I mean? I mean, there's all these ways to induce this variability that we can't account for. I get to pick on the great state of Kentucky because I'm one of 3 people in the state, got all my teeth, and I'm still not very smart. So let's think about this. This is crazy. So I've lived here my whole life. I kind of believe and kind of don't, so it doesn't matter. So I went to AGR1, which is where I get my recommendation data. So we're on a sufficiency system I'll be able to maintain. So at this range, you spread this amount of P and K. So I go to AGR1 and I'm going through the data. So I read the whole AGR1 publication from University of Kentucky. It says nothing about what lab analysis this is validated off of. None. So then I dig and dig and dig. Well, I find another publication, ID 139. By the way, AGR and ID, they're not in the same spot. Took some digging. So then I go and it says, read up 3/4 of this thing, and I finally find it says Malik 3 used by UK soil testing and many others. Malik 3, well, there's 2 of them, right? So I dig around another hour. So frustrated as I am, I call Division of Regulatory Services. Not the Ag Department, Division of Regulatory Services. They also test fuel pumps. And so I'm sitting here thinking, ma'am, I need to know, like, what is this validated off? Like, what? She says, well, I've been asked that question. What do you mean? So I had to explain it. And so she sends me through all this trail of Division of Regulatory website. And what I find is this article about this long on soil testing methods. And what it says, is in Lexington, Kentucky. There's 2 state soil testing labs in Kentucky. One's in Lexington, one's in Princeton. And that's also where this recommendation data set's validated in both places. So in Lexington, it's all black plank fence and horse farms. Horse capital of the world. Beautiful place. And down here, it's totally different topography. It's all just corn and soybeans and wheat. And then you've got the beautiful land between the lakes down here, State Park. But up here, we have Malik 3 ICP. That's what the lab analyzes phosphorus in. And down here, it's Malik 3 colorimetric. But we got one data set. But didn't I just show you, they're not even close. It's just a big range. But yet in Kentucky, we've got 2 different analyses going into one data set. How right could that be? That can't even be close. I said we weren't very smart. So I want you to look at this. So look at the agricultural soil testing proficiency. So there's 32 labs at the bottom. These lines represent a soil that's sent to the labs with a known quantity of P and a known quantity of K. It's known. So every lab tests this. Each one of these samples. I just want to think about this for a minute. This red line is about 28 parts per million. This lab interprets it at 15, and this lab's at 40. Which lab are you using? What does it do to your fertilized dollar? What does it do for your crop? We don't know these labs. I would call them out if I knew them. Might be fired, but it'd be good for you to know, right? So I want you to think about this. Are we all measuring with the same system? You might measure with the same different system than you measure. But as long as the recommendation or the lab analysis matches the result and recommendation analysis, you're fine. But if not, if you're blending all this, you're just inducing more variability on top of all the soil collection things I went through. No wonder we can't be accurate. So we're measuring on the same deal. One thing I'd like to bring up, that's probably not known. So a lot of these recommendation data sets in the Midwest were validated with Bray P1 or Malik 3 colorimetric. Then sometime along this would be back in the 70s and 80s. Tim, you probably know more about this. But we'll go with 70s and 80s for the most part, 60s even. But then came along Malik 3 ICP, which is just really simple. It's really easy. It's cheap. You get a lot of analysis, a lot of different nutrients from that one analysis. It was just easy. It was stable. It was simple, and it was quicker. Well, the world adopted that, and commercial labs adopted that. But then what happened? Then we had to calibrate or calculate our recommendation indices because we saw those numbers go up because traditionally, Bray P1 and Malik 3 colorimetric are a lower value than what would come from a Malik 3 ICP. Just because the analysis is different. Because the extraction is different in the lab. I don't want to touch on this a lot, but I just brought up a map. This is a spread map of a guy I made for a guy, and I really had to think about this. And so the red is basically a maintenance rate of 80 pounds of potash, and the green areas are 285 and 300. There's 150 foot in between a lot of those transition areas. Do we believe today that we can take a machine at 10 to 15 mile an hour and put 200 pounds on the rate accurately? Not to mention you're 80 foot wide and you got to make all these turns. How often are you hitting rate? How often is what I send this to this guy and what material is going on the ground in those areas? How often do you think that's right? We're uniquely placed with precision planting and ag code, which know a lot about application equipment. I hope down the road we can start to figure this out. It's a big problem. So you got to ask today, why Radicle? It's been this big deal for so long. Everybody's been patiently waiting. We've been trying to drag you along, but man, we're just trying to get the lab right. So we know all these issues within the whole soil collection process, application process, lab analysis and result process. There's all these issues that create these inaccuracies for the farmer, for the agronomist. So why Radicle? We had to find a way to better measure. You can't measure something. You cannot understand a moving target. You'll never hit your mark if you're shooting at a moving target. So we came out with a lab that's more repeatable, more accurate over time. And that's, so to validate this, the bucket test. So I'm kind of the bucket guy here. So I got tasked to deal with this. So what is the bucket test? So we go out to a known soil test. We got a bucket. We got a known soil test. We spade down to 8 inches. We bring that soil in and we homogenize it. We found a cement mixture works really good. And then since we do soil moist analysis at Radicle, we've got to vacuum seal these and refrigerate them to preserve the integrity of them. And then what we do is every week we take 3 samples and send through Radicle, 3 samples and send through any other commercial lab. Randomized, whatever you might choose, we choose, doesn't matter. We're doing bucket tests for our business partners, so it's whatever lab their customers use. And so over time, we get this data set of 3, 4, 6, 8 weeks. It may be months, doesn't matter the interval, but over time we see what the errors are in that. We're also doing a line incubation test, which you'll hear more about from Tony Balkwell, and we're trying to incubate the sample with calcium carbonate to see the rate of which pH change happens, because that's not always constant. We're also doing exhaustive cropping. I think Brad talks about exhaustive cropping. So it's a controlled environment. We're trying to see where, at what level we're farming out nutrients and seeing what level different soil types have show deficiencies, and then maybe some overcapacity, how to build that back up. So back to the bucket test. So this is a soil test potassium that we did. So this is 6. Each lab now analyzed 6 or 9 samples from each known soil. So they're homogenized. Every spoonful is the same out of that bucket. And so we sent them through Radicle, 200 parts per million. These little error bars, this is the bar represents the average. These little error bars represent the min and the max of all the samples that we had. So over 6 or 9 samples, the bottom of the bar is the minimum and the top bar is the maximum. So this is the error range or variance in which we have results. Well, this lab here is 140 something. This is another moist lab. So this is up in the 230s. And this lab here is 170. They're all different. They've all done we're not perfect. They've done a pretty decent job. It varies when you get out here. They got a little higher min and max. Same soil type. Phosphorus test. Let's look at this Radicle bar. Somewhere around 18 parts per million. We had 1. A difference of 1 part per million in 6 to 9 samples over time. Then we go to a break P1 lab. 17 is the average, but look at this. Now we got a little bit more variance, right? We're sitting here at about 7 parts per million different. Let's go to this one. 23, 24 parts per million. Look at the spread on this. How confident are you in your phosphorus recommendations if this was your lab? What if you're that far off? So I put some numbers to this statistically. We look pretty close to these. We look like all of us are kind of in the same boat. We've got different average values, but the variance, we're 3%, 6, 5, 12. But let's go over here. We're 3% on phosphate. But look at this one, 30% variance. So here we go. We're in a build and maintain. If you're in a build and maintain system, you're billed at 9 to 1 pounds or 18 to 1 ppm, all the way to not spreading anything based on the Illinois rec. We'll go back to Iowa for a minute. I want to reference this. They've got the comprehensive data set. I mentioned this earlier, where dry and moist are different. And so the field moist slurry in the optimum range is lower than the dry soil test recommendation for optimum. See what I mean? They're 20 parts per million. So this is the dry is 171 to 220. Moist is 101 to 150. Well, think about this for just a second. This is your soil test K. This is Radicle field moist slurry. This is another lab with a field moist slurry. These are both dry samples. Now what we concluded from Illinois is the field moist sample should be lower, correct? They're not. Both of them are higher. What does this mean to you? What does that mean to you? Does it mean our mistake's right or wrong? It just means it doesn't fit your acre and your farm in this particular field. Those results don't fit that result analysis. So just because Iowa came out with it, that's one spot that they validated on. It's not your farm. We put some numbers to this. If you look at this big error right here, that's 75 pounds, 76 pounds, you're different, $67 a pound or an acre. That's your difference in that spread for min and max. Are you comfortable with that? Based on Illinois regs, but that's a lot of money. I mean, that's your spray program. If you get this wrong, that's your spray program a year paid for on that acre. Think about that. So we put this in a real world example. So the bucket's like one known soil test, one spot. Okay, yeah, I can kind of get behind it. I can see it. We put it in a real world example. So Eli has got a 43 acre field over here, 43 and a half acre field. And we just laid a grid on it for practical purposes. And we put 16 points in it. We've got 576 samples on this. So each point, we took a bucket and homogenized it. So we did a bucket test for each one of these points here. And so we got 16 sample points, 3 labs, and 76 samples. So I just plugged in the Illinois State recommendation in my program for P&K, and I started making spatial maps. And so as we see these two spatial maps, this is radical phosphorus analysis ran through Illinois FERT recommendation tool for corn. And so what we see is pretty similar maps, right? Like we had a little variance in that. You can see a little more spread here, a little less spread there. So this is these are all the very minimum values for every soil point plugged into a CSV. These are the maximum soil tests. So what we're viewing here is the error. What's the difference if we got all the high numbers versus all the low numbers? What we found out is from high to low, we're 422 pounds difference in a phosphorus spread, a DAP. I'm a DAP guy in Kentucky. So it's about $3.89 an acre. So we only varied at $3.89 an acre on phosphorus with Radicle. For the next best lab, we did the same thing. These are the minimum values plugged into a CSV, the maximum ran through the Illinois FERT reg. So this is the variance. 733 pounds, almost twice as much, $6.70 an acre. So we've doubled the cost of the variance to us as a grower. Go through it again. This is the third lab we analyzed. So this was actually they had the most variance for min and max numbers. We were 1,000 pounds different a DAP on that field, which is about $9.30 an acre. $9.30 an acre isn't going to break us for a year, but what if you've got a 4-year sample interval, 4-year spread on that? Then you get to $40 pretty quick. Again, it gets your attention, doesn't it, over time? Because this compounds over time. Let's look at the potassium recommendation, which is muriate of potash. So you can see min values, max values. So we're about 2,500 pounds difference from min to max. We're not perfect. I don't know that we'll ever get perfect. But we will continue to work on it. But we're about $14.25 variance, min to max. Not perfect. You think maybe that's not great. Let's look at the next best lab. So you can see the maps change a little bit. The spatial maps change just a tick. But now we're spreading 4,800 pounds difference in min and max, which is $26.50 an acre. So that's $100 over 4 years. So now we've doubled what that cost is and doubled the amount of fertilizer we put on for min and max. This one really got me. This lab had the most variance, and you can see these maps are vastly different. This white area is no spreading. No fertilizer goes down here. How do you feel about your crop? Because based on Illinois soil test regs, it says we don't need that for the sampling interval you choose. So in 4 years, what do you think about this? if this had, say 50% of your field didn't get fertilized for 4 years, but then if you ran them next to that same lab at a different time, it could say, oh, it absolutely does. What are they saying? Do you or do you not? 6,500 pounds an acre difference in min and max on that, $36 an acre difference, 1 year. That's a lot of money in 1 year just to vary, willy-nilly, random. This is kind of a bar chart I showed you. So this is the difference in spread on corn for 1 year. So in total, I showed you the P map and the K map and the differences. So I put this in a bar chart. So at Radicle, we vary. You could have an $18 an acre variance year to year with P and K on corn from our min and max values. That's how much we total. That's the most we varied in all that sample set. Then we go to the next best lab. They're $33 an acre when you add phosphorus and potassium to that. Then you go to the other lab, and they're $45 an acre. Just on one crop, 1 year. So I went through and made a bean rec and did a 50-50 rotation and got all this together. So I said we're not perfect, but over a 4-year spread, over our min and max value, the most variance that we could have is $72 an acre to the Radicle lab. But then we go over here, they're $133 and over 4 years. That's your cost you. Then you get over here and they're $189. The diff per year. So the difference in Radicle and the worst lab, which could be your lab and could not be your lab. But Radicle can always be your lab. But the difference could be free seed, your chemical bill paid for the year, in just managing the error coming out of your lab, just getting a better sample today to take the variance out of your fertilizer recommendation. So how do we fix this? How do we fix it? We know that there's errors in the industry. We know there's places where we're inducing variability in our results and the dollars that the farmer spends and what we recommend as agronomists and retailers. How do we fix it? We've got to better understand how nutrients are stratified in the soil, vertically and horizontally over all management practices, so we can develop better collection methods and an idea on how better to collect soil for a more accurate sample. We got to have an accurate and repeatable lab. I just showed you from a dollars and cents standpoint what it cost you to not have repeatable accuracy. I put that in real world dollars for you. It costs you money. We got to have new data. Think about the Iowa, what I told you about Iowa. I was saying that field moist samples ought to be lower. But what we saw in a bucket test in Iowa, that just randomly a business partner sent in this soil from this field, they're consistently higher. That rec doesn't always fit your field. We need new data. We need your data. You need data off your farm to be more efficient, to get the ROI out of your fertilizer dollars. So how are we doing this? What is our approach to it? So we have developed Radicle Lab. It's a more accurate and repeatable lab, and we continue to refine these processes because today we're not perfect, but we verified we're better than what we have today. We're building out a network of business partners who are going to have these labs, and we hope they're local. We hope one day you don't have to drive 25 miles to one maybe. Maybe we get that dense in labs. Benchmark your lab today, what you're using versus Radicle. You can send your soil samples into Radicle. Do a bucket test on your farm. Benchmark your lab. See where you are. See what your lab's doing for you. Are they providing you this $200 range in variance over 2 years on your fertilizer dollar? You need to verify that. You need to know that. You can't not know that when you're talking about a $130 spread over 4 years. That's a 3-year seed. We've got crop response trials. So that on-farm data, we're walking. You're choosing a field. You'll hear from Tony Balkwell, the whole process. You're choosing a field of your choice on your farm and your management practices. How you farm your variety and everything. And we're gonna hold your hand through a process to better understand, different parameters in which your soil, buffer capacity, soil test target levels, how your soil reacts to fertilizer. We've also just began multiple soil collection trials to better understand how nutrients are stratified in the soil, how we can create a better sampling system to take away all that variance that we induce in the sample collection process. So where does it start for you today? Where does it start? Well, I think it's a pretty compelling story that it's going to be advantageous for you monetarily to have a better and more repeatable sample, more accurate sample. So we have the Radicle ecosystem. We've got the bucket test. Benchmark your lab. Get a bucket, send triplicate samples off, call us. We'll send you the protocol. It's really simple. We've got nutrient response trials that we're going to help you with. It's not a big ask for you to get data from your farm, your data. Not our data, your data, not university data, your data. Something that works on your farm. Where do you get in on this? Anywhere you want. You can do one or you can do all. You can send your samples to Radicle today and take away all the variance in the labs. You can benchmark your lab. If nothing else today when you go home, think about, man, I need to benchmark my lab. Look what it could cost me. You can start sending your samples to Radicle. You can even advocate that you might want a lab. You can do bucket tests and you can do crop. You can do all or any of these. But I think at the very least, we've got to get a more repeatable and accurate sample. And you need to understand today with a bucket test on your own, a repeatability test on your farm to know what your lab's doing or not doing for you today. So I guess I'll open it up for questions. Anybody? Yeah, go.
So when you're doing these bucket tests, are you submitting the samples as a blind sample to where the lab doesn't know who it's from, what it's for?
So I'll be wildly transparent here. No, we don't. And we do believe, we're getting calls back from labs today that are saying, hey, what are you up to? We know you're up to something. What are you doing? We're on the radar. All these bucket tests also came from a time where they're in the summer where they're not busy. Because we think they've got more time to do better. They're not in this rush and flush. And so we're going to stop some of these bucket tests, especially on that Congarville field, the grid sample field. We're going to stop that. We're going to go back to sending them when they're in their busy time. We think they can do a pretty good job now. So they don't know, but we are being exposed in the industry. People know what we're doing.
I would highly recommend doing blind tests where you just have an employee use their own account and you verify that it's actually the same. Because I've personally seen technicians throw their own bias on this stuff.
Well, and here's what I'll say. At first, they didn't know what we were up to. We just started getting the calls about June. And so we are going to kind of have to think through that process a little bit. I can always send them through.
We did present to the labs last year in Bloomington and then invited them back here to see the Radicle lab this time, roughly last year, I think it was, Jim, at Alta meeting. So they're aware, but that is a very good suggestion.
Yeah.
So we start doing it blind.
I mean, a couple of years ago, they did a blind test in Iowa. Since all the labs that are in Iowa, Dr. Bob Miller was involved in that, and they didn't publish the results. They took the results and went back to the labs in Iowa with those blind results to help them understand and improve what they were doing. And now they have a program going forward where they're doing some blind testing in Iowa. But it was eye-opening.
Alarming.
The variability he showed in the few labs didn't compare. It was much greater than what he showed here in some of the things that I've seen.
We've got plenty of repeatability data that is way more variable than what I showed you. I didn't cherry pick this. This came from a business partner and a bucket test we just implemented, and I picked some of the most recent data that we had. I didn't cherry pick any of this. We plucked a field out, and I told a story on a field. Could I have went through, I mean, I can't tell you the data set we've got from some of this. I could have cherry picked a field and literally jaws would have dropped. There's no doubt. I didn't cherry pick this. I picked the top field on this particular guy, and that's what I run with. Could I have done a better job? Yeah, but do you want to see the worst, or you just want to see the average? Do you want to see just something real world? I mean, I'm just trying to make this as relatable as possible. We've got a lot of data that shows, like you said, Tim, I mean, there's a lot of variance from lab to lab. I mean, there's some stuff that's 70%. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's like, how are you a solar? I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but like at some point, like, where's the standard?
How long is it gonna be until a Radicle result comes back with soil test rating? I guess, you know, you get a number right now. Normally, you would take that Radicle number, convert it to whatever your university is using to say this is low, medium, high.
Yeah.
When will the Radicle results come back with a number or a rating, I guess you'd say?
When we get a large enough data set, that may happen. But we're gonna have to validate that also with all our on-farm research. And from what I understand, looking and being on the inside about this, there's no one size fits all. I don't know where you're from, but if you're from Oklahoma and you're from Illinois and you're from Missouri and I'm from Kentucky, that is not a one size fits all thing. I truly don't believe that. And honestly, this is totally my opinion. I don't believe if you're in the state of Iowa, it's the same left to right, north to south, east to west. I don't believe that. And as an agronomist, to be honest, I've really never paid that much attention to that segment in which they've said, okay, you're here. Because I can go west of my house and that changes, and east of my house, 10 miles either way, and that's gonna slide that scale from what I've seen.
Are you asking, are we going to provide a recommended range or something?
Yeah, like is it gonna be based on soil type? This is where we think this is sitting, or how would a Radicle rating look in the future?
That would be like me giving coming in here with a whole bunch of a pair of shoes for everybody that's size 10. They ain't gonna fit everybody. So I don't know that we'll ever do that. I think as the data sets builds out in time, I think there may be regions where we've got a pretty clear idea and where we can define that for a specific area. How big or how small that area, I don't know is. I would say it's gonna depend on how dense the data set is from a crop response research. And it may be on.
We don't intend to actually make recommendations from Radicle.
Right.
It's to provide data, better data, so that you can make recommendations. We have no intention of getting between the farmer and their agronomist, or the farmer and their trusted advisor. Whoever's making the decision, we want to provide them with better information. Whoever's making that recommendation, we want to provide them with good information. That's our intent.
Yeah, I think the way we're going with this, where we're allowing you to do on-farm data for your deal, I think at some point, maybe if you were a long-time crop response trial participant, you might find your own. You know, I hope we can tease that out for you, but it don't mean it's going to be the same for your neighbor. You know what I mean? I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at. I don't want to leave you hanging, but I think that's kind of how you got to figure it out. And in reality, I believe that with any lab. I mean, we see all the variation between the averages of all these multiple samples. That one size fits all. Like, if there's a 30% variance in a lab, like, they're in all three ranges at some point, or 5 ranges. You know what I mean? So, like, that one size fits all doesn't really fit all. You know what I mean? And so, I think we're building a data set out here. So I think it's you build your own data set. And we're trying to help you build that data set, you know, through through our bucket test and help you understand what you've done in the past and what you might do today. But if you switch labs, like from lab A to lab B and neither were radical, I think that's gonna shift. And if you come to, like, if you're with radical today, that's gonna shift. So it doesn't matter what lab you use, it's just gonna shift, because it's kind of poorly designed to be that way, as a one size fits all, but the lab variability can be outside of it all the time. It's really hard to say. Told you I'd get tired of hearing me talk. Go.
Earlier, you mentioned about banding fertilizer and where to pull your cores. So down south, we're on 38-inch beds, and we run.
That's another one. Beds, how do you sample?
Yeah, because I mean we pull 6-inch cores, but you pull one on top of the bed, you pull one down here. Is there variance in that? That's my question. This last year, what I typically would do. So I think I pulled 7 cores. I pull one in the row, right in the middle of the row, and then just about 2 inches over, every one 2 inches over, 3 on each side.
Yep.
And hoping that that's an accurate representation, but is that the best way to do it, or is there a better way to do it?
That's part of the research that you gotta do. And I think an easy way to do it is go pull down the ball, go pull on top, go pull on the sides, make that 3 samples and see what the variance in that is, but you gotta replicate that over time. You know what I mean? So you can't just go in one spot, so I'm gonna pull right here, right here. I think you've gotta create a data set out of it and look, say, okay, now if I pull in the block, it's X, if I pull over here, it's Y, but on the sides, it's Z. And so how do I blend that and take represent that area correctly? And I don't know, I think what I've done stuff like this in the past and you start chasing ghosts, but you gotta come up with, you just figure it out, find out your baseline. Is it different? Is it not different? How much of the time is it different? How much of the time is it the same? Is it ever the same? And then how can you better, piece that all together for something that you're comfortable with and you can be consistent with over time. And that's.
I think that's the biggest point for me is consistency, right? Then we start to get into other things too. There's different parts of the country where they change their beds around, right? Or I in a controlled traffic area where my beds stay the same. Now I need to say, okay, where am I putting my plant density, plant population? What's my root structure? Where do I need that available nutrients? So that's going to change. Like maybe depending on which system you're using, whether build contains efficiency, whatever. Maybe that bottom doesn't matter. Yeah. Maybe I'm wide enough with that root structure. Like I'm gonna try to target where I'm at. So that goes back to the consistency as well.
And different bed widths and sizes, that's all different too. But I mean, I think this is all about, okay, there can be all this variability in what we're doing today. How do we narrow the guardrails? No pun intended. But that's the whole premise behind this, is to get you thinking, to say, how do I do it? Right? Like, we want you to, like, I don't know, but maybe we can work with you in time to say, okay, this would be a Brad thing probably, but Brad would throw out a protocol to you and throw it in a spreadsheet and say, I don't know, we got to come down here, and maybe a pro ain't even the thing you need. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that may be what we find out.
One thing I thought of is this last year we took our cores right after harvest before we worked here, but we're gonna pull a chisel across everything after corn harvest this year, and then throw up beds. We'd probably be better off to sample after we've thrown up beds again, because we've completely changed the way that it is, and the beds won't even necessarily be in the same exact spot they were this last year.
I think it's a perfect opportunity for you to go back and pull samples back in that geo-referenced area the way you pulled them in the fall, just like you described. Does that make a difference? I think it's a perfect research opportunity that's quick and easy, just to resample the field. Hey, you've got to come up with a baseline before you can better understand how to change.